Hey there, and welcome back to Blushing Phoenix. My name is April, and today you are in for such a treat. We are meeting with Laura, aka Soulful Taz. Some of you may know her from her YouTube channel and just her emotional release therapy, empathic guidance, lots of content on YouTube about healing and chasing the breadcrumb trail to find your way back home. And she lets us experience this through her own journey, which is what I love. One of the things I told her was, I love that you truly are a teacher, but you don't walk through this life like, I'm a teacher, I'm this esteemed teacher. You just live it out and let other people watch. So I think that's pretty awesome. She's a pretty awesome person. Laura has a video that she released about a year ago about erythrophobia and blushing, fear of blushing. And this was part of her vulnerability series that she did on her YouTube channel. This is not usually the content that she shares, but there was quite a response to this video because, as you and I know, there are so many people who deal with erythrophobia, chronic blushing, skin flushing, and the embarrassment and the shame, the psychological effects that come along with it. It was such an honor to have her for an hour today, to have her respond to some questions that I had, some in regards to the video and some just in regards to things in her life that I think will be so helpful to you. Just listening to her, I was covered in chills so many times, because when we talk to people who are working through this themselves and learning who they are, regardless of whether their skin turns red or they're afraid their skin is going to turn red, it is so inspiring and encouraging. And so much of our story is similar. The thread underneath it all that's tying us all together is very similar, and it just makes you feel less alone and encouraged. So without further ado, well, before I do that, because you know I'm not going there yet, be sure to like this video and hit subscribe so that you don't miss any updates and new interviews that I may do in the future. I'll wait for you. All right, without further ado, Laura, my friends, Soulful Taz.
Oh,
Hi.
hi. Can you see me?
I can see you.
Hi.
Hi.
We're
How are
doing it.
I know.
I
How
had
are
a fucking anxiety attack. Like 20 seconds, I was like dancing, and then 20 seconds before, I was like, but I can breathe through it, and that's how it works. How are you?
It's so good. And I'm so good. Thank you. It's funny because I interviewed someone earlier this week and she was having the same reaction. She was like, I can't believe I'm saying yes to this. This is crazy. And then I will say at the end of it, she was like, this actually wasn't bad. And I was like, well, I try to help create an environment where we're having fun. I'm going to ask you questions. And the thing is, it's your story. It's a lot of these questions are based around your video that you did on YouTube about phobia. So I'm always so different. If somebody's asking me something about what I'm passionate about, or that's my actual story, I could just talk and somehow maybe it'll make sense. But if you are asking me questions about something specific that I haven't experienced, I'm going to bomb. It's going to be horrible.
Totally. Like, because there's that love aspect of like, this is what I know. This is heart stuff.
Right.
And that's what I felt when you asked, because I don't do interviews. So when you asked me, my whole body was like, yes. And I was like, fuck, gotta do this now. But it's true. It's like, and that's why we're nervous, is that's part of this condition. Like that's what's happening. It's like, it's the fight or flight. So
yeah, it's being put on the spot too. And you know, it's funny because even out of the judgment aspect, the reason why I asked you is because I have watched your video and I know that other people have watched that video, and it's so helpful. And I think that, you know, when we turn the camera on and we just start talking, we're just doing whatever comes out of our heart. But if somebody else has watched it and they had other questions or want to dig a little deeper, they don't have that opportunity to go, I want to ask other questions in regards to this from my perspective. And so that's what I did. I just mapped out a few questions and just a little backdrop of how this will go. I have some questions here. I've got quite a few. If we do all of them, that's fine. If we do one of them and the conversation just goes wherever it needs to go, I am not a rigid person at all whatsoever. And I like to just, like you said, just show up and let it happen and see what happens. But the basis around getting you isolated to ask you questions is to really have other people.
The audio like went off there for a second.
I don't know.
Like,
can you hear me?
Okay, now. Okay, good. Sorry. Just say like the last 10 seconds.
Oh, I said it's the purpose of just having people be able to listen to you talk about more of your story a little more defined in certain areas,
Mm-hmm.
so that it can be, I think the whole mission is we're not alone. We're not alone in this. You're not the only person who does it. And the more people who talk about it, the more they're like, wow, there's really, and like for you, for instance, I found your videos a while ago. I was really going through a spiritual awakening of my own, like a new season of it, another layer of it. And remember walking in the park and I was listening to something else on YouTube and you were suggested and I clicked on it. And I just remember like when you connect to somebody, that's the power of YouTube, is like you become friends with these people
Yeah. Totally.
that you've never met. And you're like, I feel like I know you. I'm like, hey.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that so much.
So I remember listening to just different videos that you had put out there of your story, and it had nothing to do with blushing at all. It just was other things. And then when I started researching more about erythrophobia and fear of blushing, you popped up, and I was like, what? Like, it was one of those moments where you're like, her?
Like the dots connecting.
Yeah. And it felt
Yeah.
I think it felt so much more normal to me, knowing that somebody who is also walking up this path and this journey, and you've got great things to say, and whenever whatever source speaks to you and you speak it out, it comes off as very confident, not a fake confidence. It's just like you found your center and you're speaking from your center. And when I see people like you and Natalie Adams, who I interviewed recently, I'm actually so inspired by your struggle with it, because I don't look at you as a struggle or weak or all the things that you openly share that you're afraid of. I would, even after you say it, I never have seen you that way.
Wow.
How many people, if I feel this way too, and I've heard people say to me, you're this, you're that, you're this, you're that. And, people will put their own labels on us, but they're seeing me the way I have seen you all. And
yeah,
so it helps me, instead of looking at it like, well, that's her. That's how I'm like, that's how people view me too. And it's encouraging, because I think even at one point I was like staring in the screen, like, I don't see that she looks red, but I know the screen kind of dilutes it a little bit, because somebody said to me the other day, I don't see it at all. And I was like, you don't see this? But you don't, it doesn't look bad to me. But on my own skin, I am like, this is the worst thing ever. So
yeah. Wow. That's such a cool way for us to have come together. Like, that is so beautiful.
Wasn't even about the redness. It was just about your other things that you talk about that are great.
Yeah.
So I'll just kind of jump in here and just start kind of asking the questions. And then again, if you answer and it doesn't even answer the question, but we wind up over here, then we'll stay over here and do what we got to do.
Sounds awesome.
So just to kick it off, I guess for the first little chunk of time here, just to kind of give us some backdrop of when you noticed it. I know in your video you said that you put, I think, on like your resolution list that you didn't want to go red and you're about 14, and you don't know why you did that, but it was, I think maybe around 15 is when you really are, remembering it. But just more of when you remember it started happening, and the experience and how it felt, and just kind of take us back to that memory.
That's a great question. And I really I didn't even think about my story, because I wanted it to just really be revisiting it in like real time. Yeah, 14, the resolution list. I remember I was hanging out with some people, and I lived in Spain, so people were darker. They don't have the exact same shame-based culture. And so it was really easy to get me to blush. People would notice it, people would point it out, kind of like a freak show thing. And so that was the beginning of, for me, not only like all the trauma that I had experienced before, but at that point it started to materialize in the body. So I started to feel anxious, I started to feel self-conscious, and I started having fight or flight. And then the double bind was that people were then pointing out my face. So that was what was so traumatizing about it, was that not only is my body already fearful, it's that now there's like this secondary symptom that's making me be rejected, essentially. Or for me, it was all about appearing weak. So high school is such a time where you want to appear like you have your shit together when you don't, And I remember, my classmates, when I would be called on they would start saying like, oh my God, now Laura's going to turn so red. And I was humiliated. And I would go home. And for me, the kicker was like putting it into Google. Like I put it into Google, and that, I say in therapy, like that's the day a part of me died. Because when I started to see like the information that this was never going to go away, the more you think it, the more it happens. I mean, that's anyone's worst nightmare. It's like being scared of spiders, and someone says, the more you think about a spider, the more it's going to show up. Like, I just remember like freaking out and testing it out, and it happened. I would be around people, and then I was like, wait, what about that thing I read? And just explosion after explosion. And that's when it started. And then the bullying kind of around that. There was bullying. My father couldn't understand why I didn't want to go to school. I tried a few times to tell people around me, and I've pretty much gotten the same reaction I've gotten my whole life to this day, which is like, huh? Like, how is that a thing? And I keep telling people it's not about embarrassment. It's never really been about embarrassment. I mean, it definitely has shame and embarrassing qualities to it, but it's been being seen in that diminished way, in that perception of weakness, and this fight or flight that just someone could look at me and the wave happens, and then this happens, and people just assume that you're an embarrassed person, and that's not really what it is for me, especially.
Right.
And from then on, I pretty much kept it a secret, filed it away. In college, I became super extroverted. Nobody would have known. People used to introduce me as the girl with no social anxiety, and it was all a lie. It was like I just had become this like override. I would ride with the fight or flight and just be extra. And some people knew that was a, fear response, but most people just see you as like exuberant.
Right.
Yeah. So I kind of rid on that fake self, but it would creep up, and I would have nervous breakdowns, and I would be too scared to tell anybody that I couldn't leave my house, because if someone saw me turn red or if someone saw me nervous, that I couldn't survive it was my story. And so then it turns into like agoraphobia, or like phobia of even talking to people, being seen at all in daylight.
Right.
Then it just gets worse and worse.
Yeah, I heard that in your video about you were really more comfortable with nightlife and low lit places. And I've been that way too. If someone's like, hey, you want to go grab dinner? There's a couple of options, and I would give them 3 options of where I know it's low light. So they had no idea. I'm like manipulating the scenario. I'm like, which one of these sounds good to you? Because if I sit down for a meal, and I think you had said this too about like, you kind of feel trapped when you sit down for a meal.
Can't get out.
Because you're there.
Yeah.
And it's intimate too. So and I noticed that with friends, I started realizing instead of sitting at a table together or across from each other, let's go grab a coffee and take a walk at the park. And it wouldn't be as bad. Or it wouldn't do it at all, because we were side by side instead of across from each other where you're really taking each other in.
Exactly. I feel the same way.
It's just so interesting how, appearing weak, and it's almost like when it happens, we fall right into that, like, oh, here it is. And and the cycle, because for me, I didn't even know erythrophobia, like what the heck is that? But in 2011, I had a really bad season of anxiety and depression, general anxiety disorder, panic attacks, suicidal ideations. And it was really similar to when I had general anxiety disorder. It triggered from a panic attack, because I went to a doctor. I had a cold, and I was on cold medicine. And when it was like a walk-in clinic, and when she took my blood pressure, she said it was high. I've never been told your blood pressure is high or anything's wrong with you. You go to the doctor, I check out, we move on. And she said, well, let me check it again. She checked it again. And I think I was about 26 at this time. Checked it again. She was like, well, we'll come back and check that in a minute. At the end, she checks it again. It's still high. And she says, you might want to keep an eye on that. So I leave out and start blacking out and just freaking out about, like, she said my blood pressure was high. So I thought it was because I was scared of something with my health. But as I really traveled that journey, I realized it's because she pointed out something was wrong with me. And I had, similar to you, had lived my life with this, like, this is who I am, what you see is what you get. And in the inside, I was crumbling and didn't know it. But I had really built my life from childhood to perform well, be the good girl. and be seen as nothing is wrong with you. So at 26, when a doctor says something's wrong with you, my whole world came crumbling down.
Totally. Yeah. The whole thing just split open. Like, no, this is what I've been avoiding.
Right. So even with you sharing your story about blushing and turning red, it's like that same thing, just being able to see it's like something's wrong with you. And people now are pointing it out, which is what we don't want. We don't want anybody to see what's considered weakness and draw attention to it. And I think that's one of the reasons why people really get this fear from that. But similar to general anxiety disorder, where it starts building and building and building, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and you can't get out.
No. And I'm at the very beginning of understanding this. And I think that there's not enough research on it and psychological research. And I think like the panic, the fight or flight, also, childhood shame. I think a big piece of it too is like being seen. And that's the thing I've wanted the most. Like, I'm on YouTube. I found a way to meet my need without having to go through panic, but I met it. Like, it was actually really creative, but I want to be seen. And yet someone seeing me causes me to, my body flips out. And then like, even the other day, because it actually doesn't really happen often. The fear is like 95%. The actual time that I'm blushing is like 5% of my life. It doesn't actually happen that often. But it doesn't matter. And when it does, it just creates another neural pathway that's like cementing this fear. But yeah, I was turning red and I noticed I couldn't even turn towards the person. I literally had to like, yeah. Like, I had to completely hide. And that, like, from a somatic experience, it's like, that's the thing. I cannot turn my body towards someone with a red face and the sensation of shame, like, to slow it down and have them see that and like just be seen in that. It is, that's what I have not been able to do yet, but I want to.
Yeah. And you're aware of it and you're noticing the things that somebody asked me now that because my company went into a work from home status once all the COVID stuff broke out. And she said, now that you're in Zoom calls and you see yourself more on video, has that helped or made it worse? And I'm like, well, I'm all about self-awareness and learning, but sometimes that's the hardest thing, is to see the truth about yourself. But it's also where a lot of healing begins. And so I told her, I said, it's not bad, but when you do see yourself on screen, I notice that if I'm starting to flush up because I flush up my neck and my chest. If I start to flush, I watch myself fold in where I'm trying to hold, like this, which is interesting to me because it actually draws more attention if I do this pattern every time. So then when I noticed it, I was like, have I been doing that the whole time? And trying to just pull my shoulders back and breathe through it and just kind of doing like that inner work as you're sitting there. I don't even think anybody's ever noticed it on camera. And it's way better on camera than it is in person because you don't see all the ins and outs. But just watching myself collapse and fold into myself, that's a response, that's a collapsing inward is a safety response to try to hide and soothe myself. So it was interesting to see my body do, even though my mind, and it's interesting, speaking of that, you said, I wrote it in here, you said something to the effect of, it's the 2 seconds before. It's the 2 seconds before, knowing that it could be coming or that it's coming. Because for your story, like you said, it's not that you're doing it all the time. Some blushers and flushers, it's all day long, constantly. And for others, it's just the fear that it's going to happen.
And it goes in waves. Like some days, some weeks, I'm like blushing nonstop and I'm hot. And then I could go like months without really, but it's the fear.
Yeah, that fear of, and I thought it was so interesting that you said, the 2 seconds before. It's always that 2 seconds before. And one of the things that actually was really encouraging to me was when unfortunately, the day you said a piece of you died because you realized that you were never going to get rid of it. It actually was encouraging to me to hear, because when you are, like you said, there's not a lot of research on it, and any research advancement that's happening just started happening, and it's still all over the place. And it's more discouraging when you go and look, because you actually wind up in a deeper hole, or you're like, it's mast cell activation disorder, or it's this, or it's this, or it's this. And I checked out well. So the doctor's like, it's none of these things. That's not encouraging to me. Like, tell me what it is. But it's knowing if it's not going to go away. Because I think a lot of people who watch these videos are what did you do to fix it?
How
What
to
was your
get rid of it? How to get rid of it?
But for me, it's become, and part of what my channel is about is, who are we despite this? Like, who are we beyond just this? And then how do we get into that radical acceptance? And how do we get into this place of like, what are we trying today that gets us through the fear of it, and at least still showing up? Like you said, you want to be seen. You do want to be seen, and then you don't. But you have such a gift in your videos and being seen and being heard. And I'm the same way. People think that I want to be on stage and I want to do all these things. I'm the most alive after I come down, but it's getting up there that is like, no, don't want to.
And I definitely want to add to that, because I do like the most emails that I get is about like, what did you do? How did you stop it? And what I know, because I still haven't healed this wound, it's not about it stopping, but it's about healing the wound, because it's a wound, because your body speaks. So if your body is having a somatic reaction that begins psychologically, because this isn't, I mean, for some people it can be like a total skin condition,
right?
And that's it. But really, if there's fear and all of that, there's psychological material. So if your face at 15, my face starts going red over and over again, then my body is trying to tell a story. So what is that? That is my invitation. That's my body's way of saying, Laura, there's something wrong here. And if I hadn't have started blushing, I would have never gone into therapy, into figuring out like, what am I holding on to, and why is my body having a very, what we would call shame reaction. That's what blushing, like at its roots, is. So why is there so much shame in my body? Well, then if you really just ask that question and continue diving deeper, then the blushing is going to get to like the healing of the trauma that's actually causing it. And that's what I like to focus on, is like, don't try and stop your skin from going red, because it's futile, but dig deeper and like, what is that? What's underneath?
Yeah, absolutely. I just talked to a doctor recently, and she was talking to me because I've been in therapy and did a lot of work since the 2011 episode. And I actually didn't flush back then. It wasn't a blushing situation. It came years later. So like, it's like it got coded in and then it showed up later. And she said to me, after listening to me talk for like 2 hours to her about this, and then all these things are wrong. And she said, I don't think it's your mind on this one. And because she was trying to figure out, where do we start? She said, I don't think this is your mind. Your mind sounds like you've calmed your mind. You know how to self-regulate. You know how to do all these things. She said, I think this is a trauma response in your body. So even though your mind may be healed, your body's still in that loop. It is trying to get safe at all times. And so let's start there. So like you said, I think that it has to start in the head. It starts in the head. And like you said, it's really a response of, it's an invitation. It's truly an invitation. Let me ask you, for the YouTube video for your vulnerability series, what was the purpose of creating that video? What was it that made you go, I've got to talk about this? And you said in the video, I know this is going to be hard, because the more unhealed and secretive things are, the harder they are to share. So what made you, when you were doing that series, go, I got to talk about this?
That's a great question. So as happens with this condition, you'll have like that one breakdown day where you're like, I'm just, because for me, every time I blush, also the thoughts that immediately come after it is, I'm humiliated and I want to die. Like, I'm not worthy of living. Like, it goes that dark that quickly. So it was one of those days where I was just like, nobody knows I have this. I struggle. Like, at the time I was living with my ex-partner with teenagers, like that, those are the ages like where it started, like that judgmental age, like I couldn't cope, and it was all in secret. And I'm doing this YouTube search and I find this like random girl's video about it. And I had Googled it periodically over the years because I was scared of Googling it because of that first time. And I was just shocked that like someone had spoken out about it. And I finished the video and I just grabbed the camera. I was like, I need to fucking say something. And at the time, I still had not been able to like tell my partner that like I have erythrophobia. Like for me, it was like, I'm scared, I'm anxious, I'm fearful. I would use everything but blushing because, there's all these other sensations too. And I just like didn't know which one to focus on, but I was too humiliated to say it was that. And when I did the video, I mean, that's how secret it was. He had to watch the video to learn about me because I could not get it out of my throat chakra. And I still cannot. That's why this video is so powerful for me. It's because it's locked in a box. And it's just like, I've had enough experiences of people thinking that I was batshit, or that this doesn't make sense, or that they just didn't understand it. And it made me feel so alienated that I just lock and key, you know?
Yeah.
So that was the beginning, that video. So it's almost like a year now. That was the beginning of like, this needs to change.
Well, that makes sense now, because you are, I was glued to I've watched that video so many times. Stalker status, just kidding. No, but for like I've watched it so many times, and then over the past week I looked over it again, just kind of extracting out of it more for research rather than trying to connect to it. And every time it's so what so many of us have experienced or are experiencing, that you're so emotional and raw and real. And so it makes sense now hearing some of the backdrop, like it was just, let's do it. I'm doing this now. It wasn't planned. You just talking.
Yeah. Raw. That's the rawest thing, because it's the deepest pain of my life.
Yeah. And you're telling it, you're outing it all. And it, I started my channel in November 2019, which is interesting because you did that video November 6, 2019, but I hadn't seen that yet. I didn't see that until later. And
wow.
I did my first video, very similar situation. I went to the dentist. I asked them, I was getting a root canal, and I asked for the gas because take the edge off. Mm-hmm. And as I was laying there, I could tell there was a window over to the side and there was sun coming through the window. And I knew I was going to get hot because that causes a flushing reaction on me. And so I knew that was going to happen, but I just laid there. They had already asked me, are you allergic to latex? And I was like, no, I'm not allergic to anything. We're good, except myself. And so then they start the process. They've got all the things ready. I've got the gas on. I'm getting high. And the assistant freaks out because she's like, does your neck always do that? And I'm like,
no, don't point it out.
And I can't run away because I'm stuck there. And I go, mouth is cranked open. And I go, it's normal. It's okay. It's normal. And she said, okay, I thought you were having an allergic reaction to the latex. I was like, nope, just normal. And so I'm high. So I'm like locked in my emotion because the whole point of the gas is to take the edge off. But Laura, I felt the feeling of shame and all those feelings that gas was supposed to take off of me. And it did, but it's almost like it trapped it inside. Like it was a different feeling where it wasn't moving. And I just laid there while they're focusing on my tooth, they're talking, and these tears are just like flowing out. And I said to myself in my head, April, I am so sorry. I am so sorry for whatever got us here, for whatever's happened to you. And I'm sorry for making you run all the time. And we're gonna meet that, whatever that is, and talk about it. And then after the appointment, I came home and nobody was here. And I sat down on my floor in the bedroom and I just held my body and I said, I'm so sorry. What do you want to say to me? And my body said back, let me grieve. And I just like wailed in grief. And the redness didn't go away. It gives me chills talking about it. It's like my body just said, thank you, like giving me a hug. And I sat there with my body and I just kept hearing in my head, you are safe here. You belong here. You are safe here. You are safe to heal here. And just letting myself sit with myself and let my body catch up to all that work that my brain had done and my mind had done with intrusive thoughts and everything I had gotten out. This was feeling good, but my body was just not. And so being trapped high with the gas, getting a root canal. So anyway, I got in the shower and I just felt in my spirit, like, this is what you need to talk about. Cause I've been thinking about doing a YouTube channel with positive things and all the things. And that's can become very superficial for me. That's how I'm perceived in my career. I'm a corporate executive. You look the part, you are the part. But I was like, if you need to talk about this. And my first video is like right out of the shower, no makeup on, I'm crying. And I'm like, I just needed to tell somebody. And there were 0 subscribers, nothing out there, but I just wanted to start turning the camera on and telling the camera first. And then people just started coming in like, wow, hey, me too.
Oh my God. And I just want to like, thank you for like providing that platform, because I thought I was the only one, you know, you hear there's some people online, but they're not really real. And then you start seeing faces and like people who are really struggling with it and that awareness. And it's like, I mean, I can't believe you're doing it. I just feel like that's so courageous.
Thank you. And so much of it is, the thing for me is, I don't ever like to get stuck in, I am this, or we do this, and I talk about it a lot. So I didn't think I would be consistent with it, but there's so many elements to it. Like you said, there's psychological, there's physiological, there's chemical, there's like some people have rosacea that looks a certain way and comes up a certain way with the capillaries. And then you meet other people. The one thing for me is that I didn't want to create an environment where people are, this is what happens to me and this is how terrible I feel. We need to address that, but who are we anyway? Who are we with it? That's where I wanted to take people. So for you, you did talk about some OCD tendencies too. Do you think that OCD and erythrophobia and all of that is kind of looped in together and helps continue to trigger that for you?
I absolutely think so, because if my mind, like I do believe it started as my body telling the story of the trauma, and then my mind rolled with it. And the obsessive nature of just hours and hours and hours of replaying every single possible scenario of me going red, of me being humiliated over and over and over again. It's like, you know, they say body follows story as well. So it's like the OCD then took it further, and the body's like, oh, okay, this is the new story. Well, then I'm going to follow that. And it's like you said, it's just like a total endless loop. And my mind has that tendency of that, like I believe different parts have mental illness, that it's not just one thing. So there's a part of me that comes out once in a while and just gets stuck. And that part definitely was scared of the unsafety that blushing provided, because unsafety means if I go out to a restaurant and I sit down, and the likelihood of something bad happening is rare. And my body should feel remotely safe at a restaurant. But now the unsafety is that I'm going to have a reaction where people are going to get uncomfortable. I possibly be ridiculed, or possibly be alienated or disconnected from the very connection that I want the most. And so therefore, I now have a mechanism within my body that means unsafety follows me everywhere in whatever scenario. And OCD is all about unsafety and not having control. And you cannot have control of blushing, because don't think about a pink elephant. So, I mean, OCD and that binded, you know, boom, and ran with it. The more unsafe, and then it would just create more unsafety and then more OCD.
Wow. Do you, let's see, in the video that you posted on November 6th, you have almost 5,000 views on that and over 100 comments. What were your thoughts when you saw the video gaining that type of attention?
I used to check in every once in a while, like, because again, it's like I did it and then I filed it away, you know, like I didn't continue. I didn't because again, I didn't feel like I had enough information or enough healing around it to be able to provide anything. So I just kind of like, I'm going to show it. And then like, I'm just going to try and figure it out, guys, you know? So every few months I would check back and I'd be like, holy crap. Like I would have a moment of like, this is a thing. And especially with young people, like you see the teenage years, like it's starting to develop there. And I have a folder on my Gmail, which is called like the reasons that I do this. And every once in a while I'll get an email and I put it in that folder. And one time I was at dinner with my partner and I said, I've been doing like awakening coaching and emotional coaching for 3 years now. And I said, and that like breaks open my heart. I love it forever. But when I get an emotional email from someone who was a blusher or struggled with that fear, I just started crying. I was like, that means so much, because then that's the 15-year-old part who's still stuck in that fear, like getting that recognition or getting that like me too. And those are the emails that I find myself filing in that folder. And you'd think that it would be like all these other things, like, oh, you helped me, but it's the blushing ones that kill me.
Wow. Yeah, because it's one of those things where, especially if you've been alone in it for so long. And you know, it's interesting because for me, when I started the channel and I was talking about it, for me, it was exposure therapy. It was for me to be able to talk. It's the one place I felt like I could be open about it. I'm a corporate executive. I've climbed the ladder and I feel trapped in corporate. It's like the one place where I'm like betraying myself. and just still there with a bigger plan in mind. But in the company I'm with has allowed me to be more of myself than any other company ever. But you walk in as yourself, and then they create you as somebody, and then you agree to whatever that creation is. And the next thing you know, you're like, I can't come down from here. And so for me, I just recently came out on my personal Facebook page about my skin flushing and kind of like, and it's because somebody else told me open up about it and watch how much love comes at you afterwards.
How did it go?
Incredible. It went
Really?
incredible. Yeah, it was amazing. It was people who are not necessarily blushers or flushers, but people who could relate so much. And then they feel like they want to open up about the thing they've been holding back. And the biggest thing for me was just saying that I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to go talk to my doctor more. I work with a functional neurologist. I love the holistic approach. But I'd even talked to him about, I think it's time for me to talk to an actual like physician or a physician's assistant. And I just happened to find out about this woman that works an hour away from here, who really likes to look at the whole person. But
that's amazing.
In the medical realm. So I was like, that is so hard to find. And I just went and saw her this week. But that's what made me open up about it, is that once I talked to her, she walked out of the room and I sat there for a second and I felt my shoulders just drop. And I felt like relief for the first time, because a doctor was listening to me instead of just trying to tell me what it was. She was just listening and asking questions. And
that is an experience.
It was huge, because it's been 9 years. I've talked to so many different people and different doctors, and I just don't feel heard. Or like you said, how people go blushing. What?
Yeah.
Like that reaction.
Goes,
and even doctors are, well, maybe it's ADHD or it's this or it's that. You're fine. It's not about being fine. Like you said, it's not about the red. It's what's happening behind it. So
exactly.
What have you discovered since posting that video 10 months ago?
What have I discovered? I discovered that there are way more people than I thought suffering from this. Way more people than I ever would have imagined. And that there's a lot of suffering. There's a lot, it just breaks my heart. Like that the very nature of the condition is the secrecy and the shame, and shame isn't told. It's like not spoken, it's internalized. So I wish it was all positive, but it also breaks my heart, because I'm like, how do I ease that suffering in some way? Not how do I stop the redness, but how do I ease that suffering? And that's what I'm trying to figure out now. So it's like just become a bit of a mission. It's like open the doors to speak about it publicly and to heal it publicly and see how that goes.
Yeah. And it ties into so much of your other content and things that you speak so openly about and things you coach on, because it's a wiring. It's wired in. And
totally.
I think that was the thing for me when I started my channel, was I didn't never want to be the teacher of these things, because I'm like, I am currently experiencing this. And I wanted just kind of to create an outlet for exposure therapy, get myself better on camera, because I suck on camera really bad, but then also to be able to create an environment where people could talk back, because so many times I searched and I Googled and there was nothing. And that was, I'm absolutely alone in this. So if I could create a space where people could at least say, this is happening to me too, or they could talk about it, because it brings healing. You said that there have been times when you have been suicidal because of it. And what would you want to say to someone who is just in that lonely place and considering suicide right now?
That's a heartstring. That's a heartstring right there. It sounds very cliche, but the very nature of this, and I've said it before, but the very nature of this is that it's planting a seed for a specific journey that you are about to embark on. And if you look at it clinically, or if you look at it through mainstream eyes or through all of that, you're going to get caught up in, I'm never going to be able to cure blushing because blushing is incurable, and I'm going to be stuck in this forever, and I need suicide to get out. And I want to put on the more spiritual and soul lens, that if you are struggling with this, it is not just a random clinical thing. There's a reason. There is a deep-seated reason this is happening to you. And if you follow that call, you will be able to live a life full of the connection, community, authenticity, vulnerability, being seen that you 100% most likely did not experience when you were a child. And that the blushing is the aftershock. It is after all of those childhood years. It's the aftershock. It's what comes next. And if you take that invitation, what's on the other side is the opposite. It's the lack of shame. It's the lack of fear. It's the feeling, that community. That's what is on the other side. And I believe that wholeheartedly. And I might not have the answers of like exactly how to get there, but it's like, I know that it's a very special thing to have this condition. It means that you're made for more. There's something here that you need to unravel. And it's going to be 20,000 times more fulfilling when you can sit at a restaurant in broad daylight and not have that trauma response, because you're going to cry tears of joy. And this just happened to me recently because I've been doing Emdr on it. And I sat in a situation where I would usually be terrified, and I felt my heart beating and I felt all that, but it wasn't panic. It wasn't, I'm not going to survive this. It was just, oh, this is just a little bit of fear. And I realized that means the trauma has shifted out. Whether that was 2%, I could feel that 2% because I felt 100% of the panic. So to feel these movements towards healing, it is so fulfilling than if you had never struggled with this before. I see people at restaurants, it's just normal. They're like all doing all this stuff and face-to-face stuff. And imagine when you get to do that and it doesn't feel fearful, you will eat the world. You will feel like you can do anything.
Amazing. That's going to change some lives when people hear that right there. When do you feel safe, and what creates safety for you? When are the moments when you feel like you can relax and breathe?
In regards to the blushing,
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because there are times when I have felt like naming it and saying it, and that has caused a lot of safety and absolutely like the exposure therapy. And there are times where I have told a friend about it and I feel that relief, and then I'm freaking terrified around them because they know. And so now I'm like, because it's not really about them knowing, it's about my personal relationship to this sensation. And I judge the sensation. So it doesn't even matter if someone actually accepts it. So that was shocking for me. I thought like, oh, shame, you tell it, you unravel it. For example, right now, if I freeze, because for me, blushing is it's about the freeze as well. It's the like,
Yeah.
what do I do? So if I were to do that right now, and even though we're talking about blushing, I would be all the same stuff, the same story, the humiliation, because just because you know it and understand it, it creates like a way more safe environment, that's for sure. But that it's still about my personal relationship with it. But it does ease it, naming it, speaking it, being vocal about it, and also focusing on how I see the part of me that's blushing, how I see that. If I see it as weakness, if I see it as something terrible. So if I rewire that and tell myself different messages, then I'm actually feeling safer already. Another thing is, just the community and that vulnerability. And maybe people don't have the same condition, but if someone says me too, like what you got on Facebook, and then they share what they've been holding, instantly I'll feel safe with that person. And many times, you share something vulnerable and then someone goes, okay. And it's like in the air and you're like, now I feel unsafe, So that intimacy, that real intimacy, and you've shared your intimacy. And so this has created a space where my nervous system trusts that if this happens, you're not going to attack me. You're not going to do something that I'm scared of. So those are some things. And also, any therapy, any release, any therapy, any self-care, like that. Oh my God, my whole week is just that.
Oh, I love that. And you just said something so interesting about it's your relationship to the sensation and you're the one judging it. I'm like, what? That's it. That's absolutely what it is. Because There is a group on Facebook called I Blush. I just found out about it recently when somebody from the YouTube channel was like, hey, have you ever heard of this group? And I was like, no. And it's a community. It's about 1,000 people in their members private group, and they just talk, and it's like from all over the world. So you literally a 14-year-old kid can jump in there at any point and say, this is what I really struggled with at school. And somebody is most likely going to respond because it's like 24/7 because people are on different time zones.
Yeah.
So it's a great community where people get to talk and feel heard, or they show pictures and say, does yours do this? Because I think we're all just looking for something to relate to. And we were talking, they do I call it bi-weekly because I'm American, but they call it fortnightly. I didn't know what that was. So
Yeah.
like,
Totally,
what is fortnightly? Oh, it's bi-weekly. And they do a Zoom call where they'll have a host and somebody talks, and it's incredible. They were just, I got to host it, the most recent one they had, and I got to share my story, and we were all talking. It's like, all these little faces all over the screen. And I go, this is my first time to ever talk to blushers about blushing. And I like pulled and I was like, and I'm blushing like crazy. And then they were showing theirs. And I go, so this is really interesting because I'm quite a processor about things, that we know we get each other, and yet it's still happening because it's still.
What does that say? What does that say, right? Like if you're even with people who have it and it's still happening, what does that make? That takes it a layer deeper.
Yes, that's why I told them, I go, this has been so good for me because it's showing me, I thought if I got with people like you, it wouldn't happen. And yet here we are. And I don't feel discouraged by it. I feel discovery, it has become more of discovery. And, ooh, what does this mean now? Kind of a hide and seek game or scavenger hunt. What are we doing next? What does this mean? And when we all talked about, it's still the judgment of each other.
Yeah.
Do you like me? Do you perceive me well? Or it's not even about the redness. It's just about us.
Yep. And what have I classified the redness as being?
Right.
Which is like a lot of things for most people. It's like, I'm subhuman if I turn red or something, even though it makes us more human. But I love that you're saying that, because I thought that was just a personal thing of like, how come it can get worse with the with the people who should, it should be less.
Yeah.
So that just, the fact that we're kind of all pioneers in this is that I love that we're discovering, okay, now that checks out. That means it's about our relationship. And I just hope that it continues like that. And I'm totally going to join that group. I want to join.
For sure. Come out there because it's really laid back. And the cool thing about us talking in there and all blushing or flushing together was it's the first time in a people group that we're not hiding and we're showing it. And so even in my mind, I'm like, well, maybe it's because my body is like, this is what you do in this situation, regardless of what the people are, who they are, what's happening to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe the more I show up to that group and the more I wear a V-neck shirt when I show up there, because they're just out and about, they're showing it, they're letting it be known. One girl had her hair down and she pulled her hair back. She's like, do y'all see this? And we get to talk about it and point it out together and laugh together. And it's huge. Would you mind sharing if you have tried any sort of medications or anything that have helped or not helped, or are you against medication, or just your feedback on that?
Mm-hmm. And is it strictly medication or any modality?
Anything. Because the next one is therapy, psychological treatment. So any of that stuff.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. So medication, I was on an SSRI called Lexapro for about a year when I had my third nervous breakdown about it. And I actually emailed this doctor that was in South America. I don't know. He wrote a book on it. And I was like, what do I do? I was one of those people. And he was like, try an SSRI or the surgery. And I was like, all right. The SSRI actually totally did remove the fight or flight, which removes the blushing. Because if I don't have that wave of cortisol, then I wasn't blushing. So I realized that I could show up to situations better. I was confident that whole year. But then it became of all right, well, I don't really want to numb. I just wanted to use it as a tool. And I feel like it opened my mind when you're not in fight or flight 24/7, frozen in that pocket of trauma, right. You can actually start to think different thoughts. So I was actually kind of whoa, what is actually possible on the other end? And I think that was a big contributor of my awakening, was to just have that fight or flight suppressed for a little bit of time. So I say it's going to make sure that you don't jump off a bridge. If you really need it, use it as a tool. But personally, I didn't want to use it long term. And then after that, so I'm a emotional release Practitioner, so it's a form of body work. That was a big way that my body started speaking. So there are some points in the face. And the first time it happened, when they opened my face, I was screaming in anger. And I was like, don't fucking look at me. And then the screaming, which is a defense, right? It's a defense mechanism. Then the screaming turned into begging, which was the real vulnerable thing, which was please don't see me. Because I even imagine myself right now in that blushing group, and it's like if I'm blushing or I'm freezing, my body believes that they're not going to accept it. Even people who are like, look at this, it's like it doesn't matter. My body lives in that nightmare of like they're not going to get it. So please don't look at me is the story that's living in my face. Please don't look at me while I'm turning red. And so it gave me so much information. It also showed me that right after the blushing or the minute I'm turning red, I am anticipating the time that I get to be alone so that I can hate myself. I'm literally like, okay, so in 30 minutes, I'll be in my bed and I'm just going to go into dorsal shutdown and try and sleep and try not to kill myself. Like it was that bad. And in the body work, it showed me all of those things. Super helpful for processing and learning information about it and expressing some of that pent up energy that was there. But it wasn't what like totally rewired it, but it totally helped. The second thing is just having a therapist. So I have like a holistic psychotherapist, which is really cool. And we do a lot of parts work. So IFS, any parts work where you get to see the part of you that's blushing, the part of you that feels unsafe, and working directly, speaking to that part, loving that part, letting that part release, and share their story and like find compassion for that. That's what I did. I've been a year and a few months in therapy. That's been huge. And the third thing, which I'm currently in that has been the biggest, is EMDR. And one little tidbit is that anytime in EMDR, they tell you to do past memories. It wasn't really necessarily hacking it for me. I would get into really childhood stuff. And that is healing my CPTSD, like all the therapy, like, so I've been focusing primarily on that. But then the blushing thing, the future scenario of that 2 seconds before the blush, I'd never tapped into that in any of these therapies. And so 2 sessions ago, I said, can we do future instead of past? She was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, let me try that. And so I did the future scenario, the dread, and it opened the whole thing up. It slowed it down. Like in the Matrix, it showed me exactly what happens the minute someone, like the neuroception of someone looking at me, and this happens before I can even stop it or like even think about it. And it slowed it all down and it showed me. And then the next session, the same thing. So that is my personal hack, was EMDR, but focusing on that future fear of blushing. And I'm going to continue that because I really believe that it's been the most helpful so far.
That's so interesting. You posted something recently, I don't know if it was on YouTube or it was on Instagram. It was like a snippet of you doing some of the work with the inner child, I think.
Yeah. That's my teacher. She taught me the body work.
That was amazing. That was so amazing. I wept, bawled. I was like, I want to do it. Like,
yeah. Isn't it amazing? Like that work changed my life.
Oh, that is.
And I do believe that like complex PTSD is a part of the blushing. It's multi-layered. That's why we're like, we don't get it. It's because it's very complex. And so working on modalities that work on the CPTSD is going to help the blushing.
Absolutely. So I met with a Thai yoga masseuse before, I guess it was around Christmas time. So before COVID was massive here in the United States. And I remember sitting with her, like you said, any sort of therapy gives you that release. I was sitting with her because, you have it bottled up. I talked to my functional neurologist about it, and that's pretty much it. My husband knows. One of my really good friends, I just told her recently, and she was like, I noticed it. I don't even think anything about it. And I just told her, like, I would just ask that you never point it out. And if you see it, just please don't focus your eyes on it and don't like let anybody else know. And she was like, absolutely. So she's just been fantastic with it and very safe. But I went to this Thai yoga masseuse, and she sat with me for a second, and I told her about it. That's not even what I was there for. I just was there to test it out. It was like a tester day. And I said, it's kind of that moment when you get vulnerable with someone and you're like, I feel like all the things help me. And she sat there with me and she said, this sounds like she's like, have you ever been evaluated for CPTSD?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, no, I've never even considered that. And she said, this is what this sounds like to me. And she said, and
Mm-hmm.
what it sounds like complex because you can't find what your trigger is. And she said, I'm curious to know if it's a facial expression or if it's a word or if it's
Mm-hmm.
something like that, that your nervous system just takes over and you can't identify, which is a similar for me with my panic attacks and things like that back in the day. Was you're looking for the threat. If I could just match the feeling to the threat, I'd be okay, but I can't find it.
Exactly. And that neuroception of like someone going like this, or someone staring too long, or someone being suspicious, or someone, being even attracted, like, and kind of really sexual, like all of that is too fast for it's that neuroception, too fast for me to process it mentally. And my body's already responding.
Yeah. And I noticed that in your video, you talked about that, about facial expressions. And I was like, that's my thing too. And a big one for me is definitely in the corporate, because I went to school for a little bit and was like, I could do this faster if I go inside of the working world. So I got in there, figured out the system. I was like, okay, this is a system and this is how you navigate in the system. Like it's like a video game to me, and I'm an avatar. And so, which my functional neurologist is like, you realize you're living a double life every time you do that. I'm like, I know, but I got a plan.
Yeah, it works.
And so he's like, you're literally living separate from yourself. It's okay. I'm going to figure it out. And so, but I've gotten so far in that system that I do feel like I can come out of it. And I don't flush as much if I'm with my family or doing recreational things. But in the working world, as soon as I walk into that building or I'm in that environment, it's CPTSD all the way, because I have been fired from jobs. I've been told, be yourself. And then when you're yourself, they don't like it because they want you to be that version of that avatar for them. And if you believe that lie, it's abuse. But if you understand it and you're like, okay, here's the end goal. Here's how I'm going to navigate this system, do the best I can, bring my best every day. And it's the relationships that I've built inside of the systems. So that my belief system around what this is and what I've agreed to, it creates this emotional response inside of my body that it's not safe here. You tell me I belong here and that we're together and you're going to take care of me. But if I do one thing wrong or behind my back, you'll let me go. And that's my livelihood. And so then I'm floundering.
Wow. Yeah. And like this is like a big important piece about the blushing and your personal story, because everyone's going to have their different triggers. It's all going to be slightly different, which is look at the breadcrumbs. Like look at, that it's more triggered in that environment. For example, with me, with new people, I'm actually fine. Well, fine. There's always a chance, but I'm better. When you start to, my CPTSD is about my early years and family. So the more you get to know me, the more family you become. So my partner was the number one fear that I had, to see me blushing. 100%. I could not survive it. So what does that tell you? That's a breadcrumb. Okay. So the more attached you are to me, the more family, the more unsafe I feel.
Wow, that's amazing.
So figuring out, like what are those triggers, and really like following those breadcrumbs to see. Because if we don't know what the main trigger of the blushing is, at least we know where the CPTSD is coming from somewhat.
Wow. This is fun. I'm like stealing you for therapy right now. So
it's so great. No, I'm like getting so much out of it too.
It's
like
so
processing.
good. So I know we're getting ready to wrap up here. I told you I'd only take about an hour of your time. So I'm going to kind of group these together to get the most out of you that I can. So would you take a little bit of time to just share about Soulful Tawse and your idea behind your channel and your content, besides just blushing? And then also you do offer coaching, empathic guidance, emotional release therapy, kind of what you do with your channel and your business, and just kind of share with me and everyone what that's all about.
Great. Okay. So I went through a really intense awakening a few years ago. All my trauma came up, and it started me wanting to share online and to, just like a researcher that I am, like figure out how do we navigate these in crazy transformational, spiritual, all of like the weird woo-woo and emotional transformations, all of that. How do we navigate that? How can we get through it and survive it? And so I became obsessed with it. And then that led to people knocking on my door, and then me having to become the person, right? So now, like 500 sessions later, 3 years later, I hold that empathic space. Like I see it like a ritualistic ceremony, the sessions in particular, to take all the tools or whatever's coming through. What's the next thing in line to be healed in this moment? And it's a very energetic space for me. I also do the emotional release therapy, which is using the pressure points and inner child work to finish the movement, finish the somatic frozen trauma response in real time. That's also a huge passion of mine. And the channel is basically like to really show those two sides of me, the part of me that is a badass bitch that like knows how to coach, that knows how to mentor, that knows how to guide, and all of my broken, the vulnerable, and like be able to have both of those simultaneously. And it gets triggered all the time because people are like, oh, I don't see you that way, or I don't see you as, it's like, it's constantly triggered. But how can I show both and just let that be? And people can just assimilate that this can be a new platform to show the vulnerability, and like you said, to still be a strong person, even if I don't feel that way, but to hold both of those and spread information about awakening emotions, trauma, and all that.
That's what I love about your channel, is that you are not taking this self-proclaimed teacher approach. I'm the teacher and I know all the things. You see both worlds. And that's different for us to view that. I think for people to view, I see a powerhouse, like a powerhouse person that is just walking this thing out from the center. And then I see this other side that you cry and wail and scream on your video, but it didn't change what I saw to be. Like, I still see that powerhouse right there. Because
that's crazy.
That's
I don't believe that. Like, I believe that when I share the vulnerable stuff, people's idea of me is going to be diminished. So that's why it's my healing process to maintain those both consciously. Like, that doesn't change. For some people, it does. You know, for a lot of people, and that's something I also want to add to this, is if you're trying to be vulnerable, if you want to share that, you have to be prepared for a lot of people to be super like, get it, because they've met themselves, and to find more community than you've ever found before. And at the same time, finding a ton of people who are like, are you okay? Like, do you need help? And now they don't want to work with you because they're like, oh my God. Like, that is just a side effect. And I dealt with it with that video. Like, so many people are like, I'm like, and then my friends are like, can't you see her? She's more than okay. Like, she's rocking it. But some people, when they don't meet themselves, they look at that and they go, oh my God, like, she's having a breakdown. And I get off the mat, or I get off of that video, and I'm lighter, I'm happier, I'm stronger than before. But we need to change the way society sees that level of vulnerability, because it is a deep level of it. So that's something to be prepared for. More community than ever. And also it's going to get backlash, you know?
Yeah. I think the reason why what I see of, wow, this is a powerhouse, this is this person. And it's funny that I say that, because one of the things that pisses me off the most is when somebody puts me on a pedestal. I'm like, don't put me on a pedestal. Yeah, I'm going to let you down. And then they're going to do it anyway. We were in a meeting. I think I was at work. This happened recently in another situation, but it always happens when I wear red lipstick. Or
really?
Somebody will go, like, I was wearing red high heels, and somebody's like, man, I could never do that. Or cut your hair short. I could never do that. And the first thing I do is, well, why couldn't you? Because they'll say, yeah, you can pull it off. But why can't I pull it off? But you can't.
Yeah.
But I had red lipstick at work, and this girl said, man, I wish I could wear red lipstick like that. It just really shows your confidence. And I go, but am I confident, or do you think I'm confident? And she's like, I just wanted to compliment your lipstick.
You're like, let me open this. Like, what's going on?
Don't you judge me by my red lipstick. But the idea of putting that on is it makes me feel good. And it, you know, like I pushed my hair back and I told my husband, you can't do this look without going like this, you know? Yeah. And I said, it's portraying confidence, and they will believe what I put out there. And so, but for me, I'm a writer, so people think they know me, but they know my writing. You don't know me, you know my writing. And a conversation with me usually doesn't sound like my writing unless we've met on that deep level, because it's not for everybody. Yes. So when I watch you scream and wail and cry and do all these things, I know it's what is making that powerhouse come out. So I get it. And that's why I love that you brought both of those worlds together, because we get to see the person who's in front of the camera giving the advice and sharing all the things. We don't get to see the inner work. So when you get to see it, and this is what I was telling someone recently, is that we're all looking for someone to tell us how to do it. and show us how to do it. And so even though I listen to the voice inside, I'm still like looking around at my neighbors. Like, am I right, y'all? Is this right? And then we just need someone to go, I mean, yeah, if that's how you want to do it, you're doing it right. Or I watch somebody do something and I go, oh, I like this piece of this, but I'm going to add my piece to it.
Yes.
And make it mine.
Yes.
And I'm going to be inspired by that because I love that. But I think that just the emotional release therapy and things like that, the reason why I wanted you to talk about it is because when people watch this, and whether you still blush or not, and whether you still have some of that fear or not, I think people would still be interested in knowing more about the work that you do. Because I know a lot of different people that different things did or didn't work for them, but it did or didn't. So you have some people that have tried certain medications and it worked, or certain therapies and it worked, or it wasn't about it working. It was about them feeling better and being able to, like you said, sit down in a restaurant and feel free and safe.
Exactly. That's the goal, is the freedom, because the emotions might still always be there. Like that's being human, but it's our relationship to it. And if that changes, then the possibilities are limitless. And if you can feel safe in a session and your body can start to calm down and you can heal some of those like inner relationship things that can cause a lot of blushing, like, oh my God, then that means that your body feels safe. That means you're freer. Like any little piece that you do towards healing this journey, even if it's trying out a modality that you hated, your inner knowing said no, and you're trying something else, like it's all steps towards that wholeness.
I love that. Thank you so much for spending your time with me. I know that an hour out of your day is probably not something that's taken lightly, so I appreciate you just taking the time to do this. What I'll do is when I get this into an MP4 format, I'll get it into a drive and I'll share it with you so you can have access to this as well.
Yeah, I'll probably put it up like next month because I'm taking some time between my videos, but I definitely want to put it up on my channel because I think this is such a great conversation. Thank you so much, April. Like, this was so freaking cool. I had such a good time.
I'm so glad because it's really a connection. I told my husband, and I would hate if somebody said this about me, but at the same time, I'm saying it anyway. I go, I'm kind of fangirling a little bit right now. I get to talk to her like in person, because when you watch somebody on camera, you get to know them and you're like, I like that person. I like the ins and outs of what I'm seeing this person do. And so you feel like you get to know them. And I was asking someone recently who, it's Natalie Adams. She has a video.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch that.
She has a video out on YouTube, but it was just a random grab the phone and just start talking about it type of thing. And she did it a few years ago. And I said, are you going to do more videos? And she's like, I don't know, maybe. And I told her, I said, well, I think part of what people want, the I Blush group is great. I think that's a great place in the Facebook channel. So you can type to each other, but sometimes people just want to turn videos on and listen. They just want to listen to somebody tell them something good or educational or whatever it may be. And so I was trying to push her and pressure her, which is what I do, into making more videos. But
that's so cool.
I think that even for you and having this video and people being able to, you have a video where you were vulnerable and you shared, but I got to dig in and just kind of extract out of you where all you have to do is answer. And so it brings a different energy with it.
Totally. And like, I love watching interviews. I love the energy of them. And like you said, it's really like this communal energy coming back and forth. And you learn so much through interviews that you don't learn in a video with someone just talking to the camera. Right. Exactly. So I'm so grateful.
I had to remember, I'm like, ask your questions, stop talking to her.
No, it was great. It was great. And I also was awesome to just trust my intuition of like, I'm not even going to think about my story. I didn't want to see the questions because I was like, why don't I just test my body's ability to answer on the spot? And it's always worked in one-on-one sessions, but like in an interview setting, I was like, yeah, fuck it. We're accessing real information in real time. I'm not like going to go prep,
right.
So I was really, I was just glad. And the quality of the questions were so good. Like,
oh, I'm so glad.
I'm fangirling too.
Oh, I'm so glad because I come from a huge codependent background. So even if you would have froze up, I would have been like, well, let me ask you another question. Or I would have just started talking until you figure it out. And then I would stop and let you go. It's kind of my superpower now. I'm not controlled by it, but it's definitely in there.
I'm the exact same. I'm like scoping everything and making sure the other person's comfortable. And it's exhausting, but I totally get it. I would have done it too. Like just put up like the old TVs where they put the lights up on the screen. Like I would have had that ready and been like, sorry, there's like a
I have to
Yeah.
be careful not to like bobblehead, because the validation factor in me is like, yes, I hear you. I see you. I hear you. I see you. Keep going. And I'm like, she's got it. Let her go.
You know, on a side note to that, one time I was at a workshop, because I do that too. And like, I do notice it makes people feel more comfortable and like,
Yeah.
and so I'm like, yeah, like, I feel resonance. But there was this one workshop where she said to listen to someone and do not react, like do a hollow bone face. And I thought I was going to be like, it was going to be horrific. And I felt so free. It was so freeing. Like the other person felt really uncomfortable, obviously, because they're like not getting any validation. But it was, and like, that's all she said. She said, you're just going to do it. And we're not going to say why. You're just going to sit with that information that you received. And I was like, well, I received that. It felt like not having to be that role, like, was actually really freeing. And like, can I have a bitch face? Like, while I'm listening to a story? Like, is that a thing?
Yeah.
So,
and it leaves their feelings up to them. Instead of, because when people stone face me,
yeah,
it can trigger a little bit, but then I'm like, it is not their job to make me feel comfortable right now.
Yep, that's big. And the blushing thing, my stone face, like if I'm like not being received, it's like, oh, that's another thing that triggers it. But again, more information. It's all about me and my relationship to this.
Wow, it's amazing. It's amazing. And the self-awareness and being able to see myself too. There's a couple of times where I'm like, take myself off. And plus it'll show in the video that way too. It'll show just you on the screen when you're talking and giving those really good responses. You're like, they're not even really good. They were just your responses and they were freaking awesome. So I think it's going to be helpful. And I think a big thing for me is I like to turn it back on and listen to it back for myself, just like I would watch any other video. And I think it would be interesting when you watch it back, hearing you talk to you.
Oh my God. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And I really appreciate you spending this time with me.
Yeah. All right. You too, April. Bye. Bye.
Oh, isn't that so good? So freaking good. I mean, I don't even know how to do an outro. I don't even know how to do an outro to something like that. But I guess I'll end with this. Thank you for watching. I hope that this video was helpful to you. Be sure to go check out Soulful Taw's YouTube page. I will link everything down below so that you can check out her vulnerability series in regards to erythrophobia. I will link that video specifically, her channel, her information, all the ways that you can follow her. And be sure to like this video if you liked it. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment about your favorite part of this video. What spoke to you today? What could you relate to? Let us know what you think. And for those who follow Blushing Phoenix regularly, are you liking these kind of videos? Are they helpful? Let me know in the comments below so that I can know if you want me to make more. And it's a lot of fun for me and I don't have to do as much work. So it's like a win-win. And we get to talk through the thing we don't hardly ever get to talk about, which is turning red. So until my next video, I'll see you soon. Bye.